So, this is a story all about how my life got turned upside down. I'd like to take a minute, so just sit right there. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel Air. Oh, there's laughter. That's good. It's a good clue about the age of people in this room. I'm obviously not Will Smith, but that is one thing in my life that I have managed to have memorized. This TED Talk today is not one of those things. However, I promise to do my best as I get through it and share some words with you today. So to begin, I would like to invite every one of you to close your eyes. Stop looking at me. Just close your eyes. And think to yourself about the coolest question that you were ever asked. I'm going to answer that question. The coolest question I was ever asked was way back in 1988. Yeah, that's years and years ago. And it was in a kindergarten classroom, and I was 5 years old, and this fresh-faced young teacher on the first day of kindergarten said, "Welcome, students. Welcome to your first day of kindergarten. You are also the future graduating class of the year 2000. And the question she asked us that day was, what do you and the world look like in the year 2000? That was a cool question. It was a future-oriented question, it was juicy, and it got curiosity flowing in a room full of 5-year-olds. So that's my little sister, and that's me back in 1988 as that curious 5-year-old. And as was mentioned previously, I'm here today to try and convince you that you can plan for the unplanned in life, and all you need to do that is to be able to ask yourself some good questions. Before we get to all those good questions, I want to share with you a little bit more about my life. Between the ages of 5 and 15, I lived in a highly unpredictable place. It was a little dark, it was chaotic, and there weren't a whole lot of inspiring, exciting questions being asked. The relationships in my life were sporadic, and they weren't always accountable to creating the conditions for children to be the best that they could be, just as being kids. However, I made it through that dark time, even though there were a lot of times when I was so filled with anger and shame and frustration for what was happening around me. I made it through, but I didn't make it through by myself. I made it through because I happened to connect with some really amazing people. These are two of them. This is John and Napa, and this photo was taken 2 years ago on my wedding day. And they're telling everyone, who you can't see, but I promise there were people there, they're telling everyone how they met me 17 years earlier as a 14-year-old girl who wandered into their restaurant called Palomino's Bistro and went back every single day to convince them to hire me. They didn't want to hire a 14-year-old. It was a small family-run business, but I could not stop going back to their restaurant. It was the coolest place I'd ever seen. I couldn't help but ask questions about who they were and why they were opening a restaurant and what that fancy coffee machine was, because I'm pretty sure it was the first espresso machine north of Hope back in the 1990s. It was a big deal. They were so welcoming to the punky, scrappy kid that I was and welcomed me to just be in that space. And they answered all kinds of questions about what creates a good life. And I trusted them because they had lived good lives. They were ambitious, they were creative, they were funny, and they were wise. They really nurtured the curiosity in me for what the future could hold. The beauty of a quiet school hallway. One of the things that had been going on in my life is that I had this kind of story of myself that I was a high school dropout, and John and Eva were really gracious when they reminded me that the best way to not be a high school dropout was to just get back to school. So I did. And I got back to school with tons of energy. I was so excited. I laid out my plans for grade 11 and 12, and I decided to buckle down and focus. And I had so many plans. I was going to go to university, which had to be UVic. I was going to get a law degree. I would move back home to my reserve and become chief. And I would do this all before I turned 30, because after 30, well, there's no life after 30. You're just old. So, oh yeah, and the other thing I was going to do all before I was 30 is I wanted to spend at least 1 year traveling around Europe on a Harley Davidson. I have no idea where that idea came from. He might be sitting in this room, in fact, but I just thought that was a cool idea. And again, it would all happen before I was 30. However, other things happened. I met a guy, I fell in love. Things happen in high school when you're in the middle of studying or procrastinating from studying, etc. In June of my grade 11 year, I discovered that I was pregnant. Yeah, I just said that. I was pregnant in June of grade 11. And I was terrified. There were so many things that I had planned for my life, and this was not part of the plan. However, what I discovered was that I didn't have to keep thinking of myself as a walking statistic, that even though I was young and pregnant and First Nations and a foster kid, those things did not need to define me. That, in fact, I could ask another question, and the question that I was asked at that time was, what else is possible? So, what else was possible was the idea that I could still live a good life, that I could be a teen mom and be a really good teen mom, and maybe I could even graduate high school. That's what else was possible. And with that belief, I think I was able to make it possible. So thanks to the friends and family who asked that kind of a question that allowed me to consider what was possible. So, I think I mentioned earlier that I did end up graduating in the year 2000, and I had an unexpected prom date. He wasn't that unexpected, I had about 9 months to prepare for him. And I'll show you a picture of him in a second before I move on. The other thing I'd like to say about teen pregnancy, I'm sure there's some parents in the crowd who are slightly concerned about where this might be going. Let me just say that although teen pregnancy for many people is a struggle and it's the kind of thing that can derail a life, for me, my teen pregnancy was an invitation to deeper connection to other people. It was an opportunity to be well in my life, and it led to a lot of personal inquiry. A light had been lit, a flame had started to flicker, that there was so much more possible in life than to just be what people saw when they first saw me as a waddling, pregnant 17-year-old Native girl in small town BC. Okay, so back to that prom date. This is him. My son is now 16 years old. His name is Shadowhawk, and I don't know if you can tell from where you're sitting, but he's holding up the tuxedo that he wore when he was my prom date when he was 3 weeks old. I know, that's cute, right? Yes. He's going to love that he's probably quite recognizable, so if you see him later, you can tell him how cute it is. So here's my prom date, all grown up. Well, mostly. He's 16. And what was really beautiful about the arrival of my son in my life is that it forced me to consider that I needed to create deep relationships with people who would stand by my side, with people who would challenge me and nourish me and hold me accountable. I needed to learn those skills to be a good parent, but I also needed to learn those skills to be just a good human. It was a real gift, actually, in a lot of ways, this teen pregnancy for me. And to Shadowhawk, I have to say that it continues to be a total privilege that I get to be on this journey with you and learn from you every single day. Even if it's just learning about the coolest new style or the hottest new sneakers. I still appreciate learning. These are kids in the hall. So talking about relationships and those people who helped me along the way, the two adults on the other side are Brenda and Peter. They were alternate school teachers and youth workers, and everyone in the middle, well, we're all people who were deeply impacted by the way that they chose to be in relationship to their students. They showed genuine care for the students that they taught, and they cared about Shadowhawk and I. They really loved us. And they also taught us that if we stuck together, that we could create great things, that we didn't have to be defined by the fact that we were going to an alternate school, or that maybe our lives had been a little rough, that something else was possible for our lives, but we had to stick together. So this is us on my wedding day with some of my nearest and dearest friends still being kids in the hall. Those relationships taught me that although there was a lot of hard work in order for me to graduate, and it was my own time studying so that I could do my provincial exams and get B's, by the way, I could never have done that by myself. I only could do it because I had teachers who supported me and a youth worker who would drive me or my son to the school so that we could spend time together in between class. I even had a teacher, my English lit teacher. He would recite metaphysical poetry because he was convinced that it would be important for brain development. And I had a math teacher who was certain that if he spoke louder during math lessons, that my son would be proficient in math. You can ask him about that. So I did not do this alone. This isn't a triumphant tale of individual heroism. It's a tale about how we don't get through anything alone, that in fact, we always need other people. So what about that promise at the beginning about a good question, about living a good life? Well, I'll try to connect some dots. My son was the most unplanned, unexpected event that I ever could have imagined. My son's arrival inspired in me the ability to cultivate and then sustain lifelong relationships with people like Brenda and John and Eva. It helped me develop healthier relationships with my siblings. And it gave me an opportunity, and my parents an opportunity, for us to come together and find some peace and some healing through many years of tumultuous growing up. It was a true gift that his unexpected arrival sparked this deep desire and need for relationships. And with all of those great relationships in my life, I then had the space to learn about how to create a good relationship to myself. I started to ask myself questions, and I got into the practice of writing my future, so to speak. And I wrote it again and again, and I continue to rewrite it. And I do that by asking myself good questions, the kinds of questions that allow me to beckon my future forward. The kinds of questions that aren't always easy to answer, but they're necessary to answer, for me anyways, because I think that they help me have a really beautiful life. So, about those questions. Before we get there, I want to suggest that with all of what's going on in your lives, as high school students or university students, when things are getting crazy and you just have so many plans and things need to work out just the way that you've planned so that you can feel strong and successful, I invite you to take a little bit of time and to focus inward. Take a little bit of time with pen to paper or fingers to screens and ask yourself good questions that help you get to understand who you are and what matters in your life. If you do that, I'm positive that you will create a vision for your life that you can fulfill. Here are a few of the questions I ask when things get hairy. What really matters to me? Am I learning or contributing? How do I really want to feel? And is my heart singing? And if it's not singing, is there something I could do that would just make it hum? What matters to me and what makes a good life? Combinations of questions like these have been with me for many years. I often start a lot of conversations with questions, and one of my favorite is inviting people to ask for what they need and to offer what they can. So it's a good thing that I'm open to answering that myself, and I think it's one that could be useful for all of you if you're so interested. So what I'd like to do now is actually answer some of my favorite questions and let you know how it is that these things have led to the life that I live today. So, back to the beginning. One of the best questions I was ever asked, it wasn't just about the future in the year 2000. It was actually, what else is possible? That question helped me realize that what else was possible for me in my life was that I could be more than what people saw of me. That I could create relationships that would hold me strong and nourish me and challenge me and hold me accountable. I ask that question of myself as often as I can. What's possible is that I realize that I could be more so long as I recognize the importance of being more with other people. Being in relationship to other people would help me get there, and it would make me a better human. What matters to me? This is a juicy question. You should ask yourself this. What really matters to you? What matters to me? Strong relationships, communion with nature, justice matters, and challenging questions matter. All of that leads me to the work that I get to do. How do I contribute to the world? In my work, I invite you all to learn about the Write the Future campaign. It's an effort to make sure that when kids age out of foster care at 19, that they, with hope and possibility, have the same chance to ask themselves the question, what does my future look like? And what's my legacy? When I die, I hope that people will say, Kris, she made the world more loving. She made the world more just. And she made the world more curious. I invite you all to go and ask yourself some good questions. And if anyone asks about the teen pregnancy thing, you can tell them that you weren't so curious that you went out and decided to try it yourself. But in fact, I hope that you would learn from mine and recognize that the benefit, at least to me, was that I learned to practice how to ask good questions, and that by practicing asking good questions, I was able to live a good life. Thank you.